Namaste. A very good day to all of you. This is Professor Ajeet Jaiswal, Head Department of Anthropology. Let's start discussing the sixth lecture of a lecture series on Indigenous Knowledge System from the Earth for the Future. Today we'll discuss on some of the important and highlighting specific areas of Indigenous Knowledge System. In the last class, if you remember in the last lecture, I mean to say that the fifth lecture, we discussed about the practical aspect or practical concept of Indigenous Knowledge Systems along with the several specific characteristics of Indigenous Knowledge System. Now, in the today's, we'll discuss about the structure of Indigenous Knowledge Systems. Along with this, we start moving to discuss about this another important specific area that is called as Indigenous knowledge, especially in the context of our own country, that is in India. We'll discuss about several other specific features like oral traditions, elders and knowledge holders, community participation, integration of multiple domain, adaptations to local context, cultural practices and rituals, and so on. And also we'll try to discuss about all the important key aspects of indigenous knowledge in India. One important point I just want to highlight it over here is that if you have any doubt, any query, any clarification, anything to be discussed, modified or updated, either related to the today's lecture or related to the last lecture concern, then you can ask through the comment sections. Now let's start discussing about the structure of Indigenous Knowledge System. The structure of Indigenous Knowledge System is complex and multifaceted, reflecting the diverse cultural, social and environmental context of indigenous communities worldwide. While the specific structure may vary among different indigenous groups, some common element can be observed in the form of oral traditions, elders and knowledge holders, community participation, integration of multiple domain, adaptation to local context, cultural practices and rituals, interconnections with spirituality and adaptive capacity. These are the important area or structure of Indigenous Knowledge System. Now let's start discussing one by one all the important structure. First, what I told you is oral tradition. Indigenous Knowledge System is primarily transmitted orally from generation to generation through storytelling, songs, rituals and experiential learning rather than through written text. These oral traditions serve as a primary means of knowledge dissemination within the indigenous community, emphasizing direct interaction between knowledge holders and the learners. The second important structure is elders and knowledge holders. Means here to say that elders play a central role in the structure of Indigenous Knowledge System as repositories of traditional knowledge and wisdom. They serve as a respected community members and mentors who share their expertise with younger generation through informal apprenticeship, mentorship and participation in cultural ceremonies. Similarly, the next important structure is community participation. Indigenous Knowledge System is deeply rooted in the collective experience, practice and belief of indigenous community. Community members actively participate in knowledge sharing activities, ceremonies and rituals that reinforce cultural identity, social cohesion and mutual support network. Next important feature is integration of multiple domain. Indigenous Knowledge System encompasses a wide range of domain. वो इकोलॉजी को इंक्लूड करता है, ट्रेडिशनल मेडिसिन को इंक्लूड करता है, एग्रीकल्चर को करता है, एस्ट्रोनॉमी, नेविगेशन, गवर्नेंस एंड कल्चरल प्रैक्टिसेस. So that's why we call it, हम लोग इसको कहते हैं integration of multiple domain. So these domains are interconnected and mutually reinforcing, reflecting the holistic worldview of indigenous people. Next important concept is adaptation to local context. Means here to say that indigenous knowledge system is adapted to the specific ecological, cultural and historical context of each indigenous community's territory. So knowledge and practice are tailored to local environment, tailored to resources, tailored to cultural tradition, ensuring relevance and effectiveness within their context. Similarly, another important point is cultural practices and rituals. So cultural practices, rituals and ceremonies, they play a very significant role in the structure of indigenous knowledge system, serving as an important mechanism of transmitting knowledge, transmitting values, transmitting worldviews, and these practices often incorporate ecological symbolism, spiritual belief, and community solidarity, reinforcing the interconnectedness of human and the natural world. Similarly, another important point is interconnection with spirituality. So spirituality is centered to the structure of indigenous knowledge system, with many indigenous knowledge systems incorporating spiritual belief, cosmology, metaphysics principle, and so on. We can say that spiritual connection to the land, to the ancestors, and to the natural element are integral to the indigenous way of knowing and being, influencing the decision-making process and cultural practices. Another important point is adaptive capacity. So indigenous knowledge system demonstrate adaptive capacity, evolving over time in response to changing environmental, social and cultural conditions. Indigenous community draw on traditional knowledge, innovation and experimentation to navigate challenges such as climate change, globalization, colonization, while preserving what we call it as a cultural heritage and identity. So when we discuss about this structure, we may say that this structural elements generally collectively contribute to the resilience, sustainability and relevance of indigenous knowledge system, empowering indigenous community to address contemporary challenges and contribute to broader efforts for cultural preservation, environmental stewardship and social justice. So this is about the structure of indigenous knowledge system. Again, I am telling you, the structure contains 8 important points and we have to relate it one by one. Now let's moving toward another important part of this system itself, this indigenous knowledge system. Now let's start discussing about indigenous knowledge in India, especially from the Indian context. So indigenous knowledge in India, it encompasses a rich and diverse array of traditional knowledge systems, diverse array of practices and wisdom passed down through generation within the indigenous community across the country. So now let's try to find out some of the key aspects of indigenous knowledge, especially from the Indian context concerned. That too contains series of important key aspects like traditional ecological knowledge, Ayurveda and traditional medicine, ethnobotany and medicinal plant, cultural landscape and sacred sites, community-based resource management, traditional knowledge and livelihood, climate adaptation and resilience, cultural revitalization and education, and so on. Now, just now we have seen there are several key aspects of indigenous knowledge in India. Now let's try to take each and every point, each and every key aspect one by one and try to explain it. As I told you, the first one what I told you is traditional ecological knowledge, TEK. So indigenous community in India, it possesses extensive traditional ecological knowledge, including practices related to agriculture, practices related to forestry, practices related to water management, practices related to biodiversity conservation, and so on. So traditional farming techniques such as agroforestry, mixed cropping and organic farming are based on centuries of observation and adaptation to local environment. So this is about traditional ecological knowledge. Next is Ayurveda and traditional medicine. Ayurveda, which is known to be the traditional system of medicine in India, is deeply rooted in indigenous knowledge system and holistic approach to health and wellness. Ayurvedic medicine incorporates herbal remedies, dietary practices, lifestyle interventions, and therapeutic techniques that have been practiced for thousands of years. Even the indigenous healing traditions also include other systems such as Siddha, Unani, and tribal medicine, each with its own unique knowledge base and practices. Similarly, the another important point is ethnobotany and medicinal plant. So, indigenous knowledge in India have a wealth of knowledge about medicinal plant and their uses for what? For treatment, for various ailments. So, ethnobotanical studies document the traditional use of plant for medicine, for food, for fiber, and for cultural processes. Many indigenous people have intimate knowledge of local flora and their medicinal properties, which are often passed down orally through generation. Another important point is cultural landscape and sacred sites. Indigenous knowledge in India encompasses the spirituality, cultural and ecological significance of sacred sites, what we call it pilgrimage routes, and cultural landscape. There is a traditional belief, rituals and ceremonies associated with the sacred sites, reflecting indigenous cosmologies, worldview and connection to the land. These cultural landscapes are often the focus of cultural revitalization efforts and community-led conservation initiative. You must have seen Ayodhya issue, Ram Janmabhoomi. So many things are there. So many places are there which has some relationship with the religion, land, beliefs, spirituality, and so on. So similarly, the next important point is community-based resource management. Indigenous community in India practice a community-based resource management system that prioritize sustainable use, conservation, and equitable distribution of natural resources. There is a customary law, there is a traditional governance, structure also, and participatory decision-making processes that ensure that local knowledge and values are integrated into resource management practices. Next important point is traditional knowledge and livelihood. Indigenous knowledge systems are integral to the livelihood and cultural identities of many indigenous communities, especially in India. The traditional livelihoods such as fishing, hunting, gathering, agriculture, pastoralism, handicraft, and so on. So all are based on indigenous knowledge of a local ecosystem, local season, and natural resources. Indigenous knowledge also inform traditional occupation such as weaving, pottery, metalworking, and folk art. Similarly, the another important point is cultural adaptation and resilience. Indigenous community in India have developed an adaptive strategy for coping with climate variability, extreme weather events, and environmental changes. Even the traditional water harvesting technique, soil conservation practices, agroecological method, and indigenous crop varieties contribute to community resilience and food security in the face of the climate change. Next important point or the key aspect of indigenous knowledge in India is cultural revitalization and education. Indigenous knowledge in India is transmitted intergenerationally through cultural education program, a very important part of the new national education policy. They discuss about that. They discuss about cultural education program. They discuss about the information that was transmitted oral, that is oral tradition, storytelling, experiential learning within the communities. So effort to revitalize indigenous knowledge, indigenous language, cultural practices, and traditional knowledge systems are essential for preserving cultural diversity and promoting indigenous right and self-determination. So overall, we may say that indigenous knowledge in India reflect the diverse cultural, ecological and socio-economic context of indigenous people across the country. Recognizing, respecting and promoting indigenous knowledge system is crucial for achieving sustainable development. It is crucial for achieving social justice and cultural diversity in India. So that's all for today's or the sixth series of sixth lecture of the series. One important point I just want to highlight it over here is that if you have any doubt, any questions related to the earlier class or this class, feel free to discuss and you can ask through the comment section. Even if you have any doubt or questions related to any area of anthropology, then that also you may ask through the comment section. Another important point, information I just want to inform to you, all of you, is that new video related to anthropology as well as this series concern will come daily around 1 p.m. as far as the Indian Standard Time concerns. So please keep your information center open. Thank you so much. Namaste.